Legal advice family made me give up dog for inheritance, so I called police. The lawyer's words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I'm sorry, but the will is very clear. To receive your inheritance, you must surrender custody of your dog within 72 hours. I stared at him across his mahogany desk, my hands trembling as I held the legal documents. My golden retriever mix, Charlie, was sitting faithfully at my feet in the law office, his warm brown eyes looking up at me like he always did when he sensed I was upset. He'd been doing that a lot lately, ever since Grandma Rose passed away 3 weeks ago. There has to be some mistake, I whispered, my voice cracking. Grandma loved Charlie. She's the one who helped me adopt him when I was going through the worst depression of my life's sophomore year. Mr. Patterson, the estate attorney, adjusted his glasses and pointed to a specific paragraph in the will. Unfortunately, there's no ambiguity here. Your grandmother was quite specific. She believed that at 22, you needed to learn about making difficult choices and sacrifices. The dog must be surrendered to your Aunt Linda and Uncle David, who will find him a more appropriate home. My stomach churned. Aunt Linda had never liked Charlie, always complaining about dog hair on furniture and making snide comments about how I babied him. Uncle David was even worse, constantly suggesting I should get rid of my mutt and focus on being a real adult. But the inheritance. I started, then stopped. $200,000. My grandmother's entire life savings, left to me for college and starting my life. Without it, I'd be drowning in student loans forever, probably forced to drop out of my pre-med program and give up my dream of becoming a veterinarian. The choice is yours, of course, Mr. Patterson continued, his tone annoyingly professional. But I should mention that your aunt and uncle are quite insistent about this condition being honored. They've made it clear they'll contest the entire will if this stipulation isn't followed exactly. I looked down at Charlie, who had somehow sensed the conversation was about him. His tail gave a hesitant wag, and he pressed closer to my legs. This dog had literally saved my life. When panic attacks kept me locked in my dorm room for days, he'd force me to go outside. When nightmares plagued my sleep, he'd curl up next to me until the fear passed. He wasn't just a pet, he was my lifeline, my emotional support animal, my best friend. How long do I have to decide? I asked, though my heart was already breaking. The 72 hours starts from when I read you the will. That was yesterday, so you have about 48 hours left. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of this stranger. Outside in the parking lot, I knelt down and buried my face in Charlie's fur, breathing in his familiar scent of dog shampoo and sunshine. I don't know what to do, buddy, I whispered into his neck. I can't lose you, but I can't throw away my entire future either. Charlie licked my face, his warm tongue catching a tear I didn't realize had fallen. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Linda, hope you're making the right choice, sweetie. Grandma Rose knew what was best for you. It's time to grow up. Something about her tone made my skin crawl, but I was too overwhelmed to analyze it properly. All I could think about was the impossible choice ahead of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Charlie seemed to sense something was wrong and kept nudging me with his cold nose every time I started to drift off. By 3 a.m., I gave up and sat on my tiny apartment floor, scrolling through old photos of him and Grandma Rose. There was one from last Christmas where she was sneaking him pieces of turkey under the dinner table while Aunt Linda wasn't looking. Another from my 21st birthday where Grandma had bought Charlie his own little party hat. In every single photo, her face lit up whenever she looked at him. She called you her grand dog, I whispered to Charlie, showing him the phone screen. Remember how she always saved you the good bacon? My phone rang, startling us both. Aunt Linda's name flashed on the screen. Did I wake you, honey? Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. I was just so worried about you, up all night thinking about this difficult situation. It's fine, I lied, rubbing my burning eyes. You know, David and I have been talking, and we want you to know we understand how hard this must be. But your grandmother was so wise, wasn't she? She knew that keeping that dog would hold you back from your full potential. Something twisted in my gut. Grandma never said anything like that to me. She loved Charlie. Oh sweetie, there's so much you didn't know about Rose's final months. She was so worried about your dependency issues. She felt terrible that she'd enabled your attachment to that animal when you should have been forming human relationships, focusing on your studies. Dependency issues? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Now don't get defensive. We're family, and family tells each other hard truths. Your grandmother confided in us about how concerned she was. She said you used that dog as a crutch instead of dealing with your problems like an adult. The words hit like physical blows. Grandma Rose had been the one person who understood my anxiety, who never made me feel broken or weak for needing Charlie. She wouldn't have said those things. She couldn't have. I need more time to think about this, I managed. Of course, dear. But remember, the deadline is firm. And sweetheart, we've already found a lovely family for Charlie. A nice couple with a big farm upstate. He'll be so much happier running around in open fields than being cooped up in your little apartment. After she hung up, I felt nauseous. Something was wrong with this whole situation, but grief was making it hard to think clearly. I kept second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe Aunt Linda was right. Maybe I was too dependent on Charlie. Maybe Grandma had seen something I couldn't. The next morning, I drove to Grandma's house, hoping to find some clarity in the place where we'd spent so many happy afternoons. The key was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the front door, just like always. Inside, everything felt frozen in time. Grandma's reading glasses still sat on the kitchen table next to yesterday's crossword puzzle. But something felt off. The house was too clean, too organized. Grandma had been a gentle hoarder of memories, every surface usually covered with photos, letters, knickknacks from her travels. Now the counters were bare, and when I opened the junk drawer where she kept everything important, it was completely empty. That's weird, I murmured to Charlie, who was sniffing around his old food bowl in the corner. Even that had been scrubbed clean. I climbed the stairs to Grandma's bedroom, my heart pounding. Her jewelry box sat open and empty on the dresser. The closet where she kept her important documents was cleared out too. Someone had been here. Someone had taken everything. And I was starting to suspect I knew who. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call Aunt Linda, but before I could dial, I heard the front door slam downstairs. Charlie's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, something he rarely did. "Hello." I called out, my voice echoing through the empty house. "Just us, sweetie." Aunt Linda's voice drifted up the stairs, followed by the heavy footsteps of Uncle David. I quickly closed the empty closet and tried to look casual as they appeared in the doorway. Aunt Linda's smile seemed forced, and Uncle David's eyes immediately went to Charlie with obvious distaste. "What are you doing here?" Linda asked, though her tone remained artificially sweet. "We didn't expect anyone to be here." "I still have a key," I said carefully. "I just wanted to feel close to Grandma, I guess. But it looks like someone already cleaned everything out." Linda and David exchanged a quick glance that made my stomach drop. "Oh, that was us," Linda said, waving her hand dismissively. "We thought it would be easier on you, honey. Going through a deceased person's belongings can be so traumatic. We took care of all the difficult stuff, old bills, medical records, that sort of thing." "What about her photos?" "Her jewelry?" "All safe and sound," Uncle David chimed in, his voice gruff. "We're handling the estate properly. That's what family does." Something in his tone made Charlie move closer to my legs, pressing against me protectively. Uncle David noticed and his face darkened. "Speaking of family responsibilities," he continued, "time's running out on your decision about that mutt. Less than 24 hours now." "David," Linda said with a fake laugh, "don't call Charlie names. We know this is hard for our girl." She turned to me with what I'm sure she thought was a compassionate expression. "But honey, we really do need an answer soon. The new family is expecting him tomorrow." "New family?" I felt like I was going to be sick. "You already arranged for someone to take him?" "Well, we had to be practical," Linda said. "These things need to be planned in advance. Don't worry though, they're lovely people. Very capable of handling a large dog." The way she said capable sent chills down my spine. "I want to meet them first." "Oh, that's not really necessary," David started. "If I'm giving up my dog, I want to know where he's going." My voice came out stronger than I felt. "That's non-negotiable." Linda's mask slipped for just a second, and I caught a glimpse of irritation before the fake smile returned. "Of course, dear. We just thought it might make things harder for you, getting attached to the idea of visiting or staying in contact. Sometimes a clean break is healthiest." "Clean break?" I stared at her. "He's not just some object I'm getting rid of. This is Charlie." "And that's exactly the problem," David said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Your grandmother saw how unhealthy this attachment was. The dog has made you weak, dependent. You can't even make a simple decision without falling apart." His words stung because part of me feared they might be true. But as I looked down at Charlie, who was watching this entire exchange with alert, intelligent eyes, I remembered something Grandma Rose used to say, "That dog of yours has better instincts about people than most humans do, sweetheart. Trust him." Charlie had never liked Linda and David. Even as a puppy, he'd avoided them, hiding behind my legs whenever they visited. I'd always assumed it was because they weren't dog people. Now I was wondering if there was more to it. "I need to see the will again," I said suddenly. "The original document." "Whatever for?" Linda asked, her voice sharper now. "I want to read it myself. All of it. Not just have a lawyer summarize it for me." The silence that followed felt deafening. That's really not necessary," Linda said, her laugh sounding forced. "Mr. Patterson explained everything perfectly clearly. Why would you want to put yourself through reading all that legal jargon?" "Because it's my inheritance," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "And honestly, something about this whole situation feels wrong." Uncle David's face flushed red. "Wrong? Your grandmother's final wishes feel wrong to you? The grandmother who helped me train Charlie to be my emotional support animal feels wrong leaving a will that forces me to give him up, yeah." I stood up straighter, Charlie immediately moving to my side. "The grandmother who bought him Christmas presents and called him her granddog feels wrong demanding I abandon him to get my inheritance." "People change their minds," Linda said quickly. "Especially when they're older. More worried about practical concerns." Grandma was sharp as a tack right up until the heart attack, I shot back. She wasn't some confused elderly woman making random decisions. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. David stepped closer, his bulk intimidating in the small bedroom doorway. "Listen here, you ungrateful little." "David." Linda's warning was sharp. She placed a restraining hand on his arm, but her fake smile had completely disappeared. "What my husband means is that we're all grieving, and grief can make us question things that are perfectly clear. Then showing me the original will should be easy enough." "Mr. Patterson has the original," Linda said. "That's standard procedure." "Then I'll call him right now and ask to see it." I pulled out my phone. "It's Saturday," David said quickly. "His office is closed." I looked at my phone screen. It was actually only 2 p.m. on a Friday. "No, it's not." Another uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Charlie's low growl rumbled through the quiet, and I realized his hackles were raised, something I'd only seen him do once before, when an aggressive dog had cornered us at the park. "You know what?" Linda said, her voice taking on a cold edge I'd never heard before. "Maybe we've been too patient with you. Your grandmother left specific instructions because she was worried about exactly this kind of behavior, your inability to make mature decisions, your tendency to be dramatic and paranoid." "Paranoid?" "Coming here, going through her things, questioning legal documents, making wild accusations." Linda stepped closer, and Charlie moved protectively in front of me. "Face it, honey. You're having some kind of breakdown, just like you did sophomore year. The difference is that now you don't have Grandma Rose to enable your episodes." The word episodes hit like a slap. My panic attacks and depression weren't episodes, they were real medical conditions that Charlie had been trained to help me manage. "That's not what this is," I said, but I could hear the doubt creeping into my voice. "Isn't it?" David joined in. "Look at yourself. You're standing in a dead woman's bedroom, making conspiracy theories about people who love you, because you can't accept reality. The reality that Grandma would force me to choose between my future and my dog. The reality that you're 22 years old and it's time to grow up, Linda snapped, her mask finally falling away completely. That animal has kept you from developing normal relationships, normal coping skills. Rose saw that, even if she was too soft-hearted to say it to your face. My chest tightened with familiar anxiety, and I felt the edges of a panic attack starting to creep in. But Charlie pressed closer to my legs, applying the deep pressure therapy he'd been trained to provide, and somehow that helped me focus. If that's true, I said slowly, then why are you both so afraid to let me see the actual will? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Linda and David exchanged another one of their loaded glances. Fine, Linda said finally. We'll call Mr. Patterson right now and arrange for you to see it. But when you do, and when you realize we're telling the truth, you'll surrender that dog tomorrow. No more delays, no more games. Deal? Something in her tone made me hesitate, but I was backed into a corner. Deal. The phone call to Mr. Patterson's office was surreal. I sat in Grandma's kitchen while Linda dialed, her fingers drumming impatiently on the table. Charlie hadn't left my side since our confrontation upstairs, and I noticed he kept glancing toward the back door like he wanted to bolt. Hi, this is Linda Morrison calling about the Rosechin estate, she said into the phone, her voice saccharine again. My niece would like to review the original will document. Yes, I understand it's unusual. No, Monday won't work. She needs to see it today. I watched her face carefully during the conversation. For someone who claimed this was all legitimate, she seemed awfully nervous. He can see us in an hour, she announced, hanging up. But he wasn't happy about the weekend appointment. That's fine, I said. I can drive myself. Nonsense, David interjected. We'll all go together. Families should stick together during difficult times. The way he said it felt more like a threat than support. I had the distinct feeling they didn't want me talking to the lawyer alone. The drive to Mr. Patterson's office was tense and quiet. Charlie rode in my lap in the back seat, which normally would have earned a lecture from Linda about proper pet restraint, but she seemed lost in thought. David kept checking his phone and muttering under his breath. Everything okay? I asked. Just work stuff, he said curtly. Some people don't respect family time. But I caught a glimpse of his screen in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at work emails, he was scrolling through what looked like real estate listings. Expensive ones. My stomach churned as pieces started clicking together. The cleaned-out house. Their insistence on handling all of Grandma's belongings. David looking at properties way above their normal price range. Have you two been planning to buy a new house? I asked, trying to sound casual. Linda's shoulders tensed. We might downsize eventually. Why? Just wondering. Those looked like pretty expensive listings on David's phone. David's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and there was something cold in them that made Charlie whimper softly. You seem awfully interested in our personal business, he said. Just making conversation. Maybe focus on your own decisions instead of worrying about ours. The law office felt different this time. Mr. Patterson seemed uncomfortable when we all crowded into his office, especially when Charlie immediately moved to a corner and lay down with his body language screaming stress. This is highly irregular, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. Typically, beneficiaries review documents privately. We're all family here, Linda said smoothly. No secrets between us. Mr. Patterson looked skeptical but pulled out a manila folder. Very well. Here's the original will. He handed me the document, and I started reading immediately. The legal language was dense, but I pushed through it, looking for the section about Charlie. And there it was, in black and white, the beneficiary must surrender custody of any pets to Linda and David Morrison within 72 hours of this will being read. But something looked off about the text. The font seemed slightly different, and the paper looked newer than the rest of the document. Can I see this under better light? I asked. Mr. Patterson frowned. Is there a problem? I just want to read it carefully. He turned on the desk lamp and angled it toward the will. In the brighter light, it was obvious. The paragraph about Charlie was printed on different paper and had been inserted into the document. The edges didn't quite align, and the paper quality was noticeably different. This page has been altered, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. That's ridiculous, Linda said quickly. Why would you even think that? Because the paper is different. Look. I held it up to the light. This section was added later. Mr. Patterson leaned forward, his expression suddenly very serious. May I see that? I handed him the document, and he examined it closely under the lamp. His face went pale. Linda, he said slowly, we need to talk. Mr. Patterson's face went from pale to ashen as he examined the will under the bright desk lamp. His hands were trembling slightly as he turned the pages, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead. Linda, he repeated, his voice strained, we really need to discuss this privately. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of everyone, Linda replied, but her voice had lost its confident edge. We're all family here. No. Mr. Patterson's tone was firm as he carefully placed the will back in its folder. This is a legal matter that requires immediate attention. I need to speak with Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Morrison alone. Now. Uncle David shifted in his chair, his bulk making the leather creak ominously. Look, if there's some kind of paperwork error, we can fix it. No need to make a big production out of this. Paperwork error? Mr. Patterson's voice cracked slightly. Sir, what I'm looking at suggests potential document tampering. This is a felony matter. The word felony hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Charlie, who had been lying quietly in the corner, suddenly lifted his head and let out a low whine. He could sense the shift in the room's energy, the way tension was crackling between all of us like electricity. That's impossible, Linda said, but she was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Rose signed that will in front of witnesses. You know this, Patterson. You were there. I was there when she signed a will, yes. His words were measured, careful. But the document I witnessed didn't contain any provisions about pets. Mrs. Chen was very fond of her granddaughter's dog. She specifically mentioned wanting to make sure Charlie was cared for if anything happened to. He stopped abruptly. If anything happened to what? I pressed. Mr. Patterson looked at me with something that might have been pity. To you. She was worried about your mental health struggles and wanted to ensure Charlie would be protected as your emotional support animal. The room spun around me. She wanted to protect Charlie. More than that. She wanted to establish a small trust fund specifically for his veterinary care and training. She was researching ways to make sure no one could ever force you to give him up. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All this time, while Linda and David had been telling me Grandma thought Charlie was holding me back, she'd actually been trying to protect him. Protect us. You're misremembering, David said, his voice getting louder. Old woman changed her mind in those final weeks. Started seeing things differently. I don't misremember legal documents, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Patterson's professional composure was cracking. Especially not ones involving this amount of money. Mrs. Chen was very specific about her wishes, and pet surrender was never mentioned. Linda suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I think we've heard enough speculation for one day. David, we're leaving. Sit down, Mr. Patterson said sharply. No one is leaving until we get to the bottom of this. You can't keep us here, David growled, also rising from his chair. We're not criminals. Aren't you? The question slipped out before I could stop myself. Both of them turned to stare at me, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw real fear in their eyes. Not the fake concern they'd been showing me, but genuine terror at being caught. What did you say? Linda's voice was deadly quiet. Grandma's house was cleaned out, I said, my voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. All her personal papers, her jewelry, everything valuable, gone. You said you were handling her belongings, but you were really stealing them, weren't you? How dare you, David started. And now this will, conveniently forcing me to give up the one thing that might make me fight back. The one thing that keeps me stable enough to ask questions. I looked at Charlie, who was now sitting at attention, watching my aunt and uncle like they were threats he needed to monitor. You were counting on me being too grief-stricken and anxious to think clearly. Mr. Patterson was frantically flipping through files in his desk drawer. I need to find my original notes from Mrs. Chen's appointment. If there's been document tampering, we need to involve the authorities immediately. The authorities? Linda's voice cracked. Patterson, you're overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. $300,000 is not a simple misunderstanding, he snapped. I felt my heart stop. 300,000. I thought it was 200. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda and David looked like deer caught in headlights, and Mr. Patterson's face went white as he realized his mistake. The inheritance, I said slowly, was $300,000, wasn't it? But you told me 200. Where did the other 100,000 go? Nobody answered, but I didn't need them to. The expensive house listings on David's phone. Linda's new designer purse I'd noticed but hadn't really registered. The way they'd been so eager to clean out Grandma's house before anyone else could see what was there. Charlie stood up and moved to my side, pressing against my legs as he sensed my rising panic. But this time, the panic wasn't from anxiety, it was from rage. You've been stealing from her, I whispered. That's why you needed me out of the picture. That's why you needed me too broken and desperate to ask questions. David took a step toward me, his face flushed with anger. You don't know what you're talking about, you little. Charlie's growl cut him off mid-sentence. My sweet, gentle therapy dog was baring his teeth at my uncle, every muscle in his body coiled and ready to protect me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Easy, Charlie, I said softly, placing my hand on his head, but I didn't make him back down. Something primal in me was glad to see David finally face something he couldn't intimidate. Mr. Patterson had gone completely silent, frantically searching through his filing cabinet. Papers scattered across his desk as he pulled out folder after folder, muttering under his breath. Where are my consultation notes? I always keep detailed records. You won't find anything, Linda said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Because there's nothing to find. You're an old man, Patterson. Your memory isn't what it used to be. My memory is fine, he snapped, not looking up from his search. And I'm 58, not senile. I remember Mrs. Chen's exact words about that dog. Charlie saved my granddaughter's life. I want to make sure he's protected forever. The words hit me like a physical blow. That sounded exactly like something Grandma would say. She told me countless times how proud she was that I'd gotten help for my depression, how smart I was to get Charlie trained as a therapy animal. She never said that, David insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. Actually, she did. A new voice from the doorway made us all turn. A woman in her 50s stood there wearing scrubs, her graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Sorry to interrupt, but your secretary wasn't at her desk and the door was open. I could hear raised voices. Dr. Martinez. Mr. Patterson looked up from his files, confusion clear on his face. What are you doing here? I had some questions about settling my father's estate, but this seems like a bad time. She started to back toward the door, then paused, looking directly at Linda and David. Although I couldn't help overhearing something about Rose Chen. She was one of my patients. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Linda's face went ashen. Dr. Martinez was your grandmother's physician, Mr. Patterson explained to me, then turned back to her. We're dealing with some irregularities regarding Mrs. Chen's will. What kind of irregularities? Dr. Martinez stepped into the room, her medical training probably picking up on the tension and stress radiating from everyone. Someone's been asking questions they have no right to ask, David said through gritted teeth. Actually, Dr. Martinez said slowly, if this is about Rose Chen's estate, I might have some relevant information. I've been meaning to follow up on some concerns I had about her final weeks. My heart started pounding. What kind of concerns? Linda shot to her feet again. This is ridiculous. We don't need to listen to gossip from her doctor. Dr. Martinez's voice was sharp with professional authority. The doctor who treated her for nearly 15 years. The doctor who noticed some very unusual changes in her behavior during her last few appointments. What changes? I asked. Charlie pressed protectively against my legs. Dr. Martinez glanced at Linda and David, then back at me. Patient confidentiality usually prevents me from discussing this, but given the circumstances. Your grandmother seemed increasingly anxious about family members pressuring her to make changes to her will. She specifically mentioned being worried about people taking advantage of her after she was gone. That's a lie, Linda said, but her voice was shaking now. She also mentioned being concerned about your dog, Dr. Martinez continued, looking at me. She said some family members were trying to convince her that Charlie was bad for your mental health. But she'd seen how much better you were doing since getting him. She was actually considering expanding her will to include provisions for his care. The room was dead silent except for Charlie's soft panting and the rustle of papers as Mr. Patterson continued his frantic search. Rose was sharp as a tack during every appointment, Dr. Martinez said firmly. If she left a will that contradicted everything she'd been telling me about wanting to protect you and your dog, I'd want to see the documentation for that change of heart. Here. Mr. Patterson suddenly shouted, holding up a yellow legal pad. Found my consultation notes from her appointment in March. He started reading aloud, and with each word, I watched Linda and David's faces crumble like sandcastles hit by waves. Mr. Patterson's voice filled the office as he read from his yellow legal pad, each word hitting like a nail in a coffin. March 15th consultation with Rose Chin. Client expressed concern about family members pressuring her to change inheritance terms. Specifically mentioned nephew-in-law David Morrison suggesting she cut back granddaughter's inheritance due to irresponsible pet ownership. Client was adamant this would not happen. Quote, that dog is the best thing that ever happened to my granddaughter. Over my dead body will anyone take him from her. Linda's face had gone completely white. Those notes could be about anyone. March 22nd follow-up, Mr. Patterson continued reading. Client reported increased pressure from Linda Morrison to reconsider enabling granddaughter's dependency issues. Client requested information about establishing pet trust fund. Discussed options for ensuring Charlie's protection in perpetuity. Stop, David said, his voice hoarse. Just stop. But Mr. Patterson kept reading. March 29th, client's final appointment. Mrs. Chen signed revised will including specific protections for granddaughter's emotional support animal. Will also includes provision that if any family member attempts to separate granddaughter from dog, they forfeit any claim to estate assets. The silence that followed was deafening. Charlie whimpered softly and pressed closer to me, sensing the explosive tension in the room. That's not the will we have on file, Mr. Patterson said slowly, looking up from his notes. His face was pale with realization. Someone substituted a different document. Linda suddenly bolted for the door, but Dr. Martinez stepped sideways, blocking her path. I don't think anyone should be leaving just yet. You can't keep us here. Linda's composure finally shattered completely. We haven't done anything wrong. Haven't you? Dr. Martinez's voice was ice cold. Because I also have some questions about why Rose's regular medications were suddenly being picked up by family members instead of herself during her final weeks. Very unusual for such an independent woman. My blood turned to ice water. What medications? Heart medication, Dr. Martinez said grimly. She was very consistent about taking them exactly as prescribed. But the pharmacy records show David Morrison picked up her last 3 refills. So. David's voice cracked. We were helping her out. She was getting forgetful. She wasn't forgetful at all, Dr. Martinez snapped. Her cognitive function was perfect. But someone picking up medication for an elderly person creates opportunities for interference. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. My grandmother hadn't just died of a heart attack. Someone might have tampered with her medication. You killed her, I whispered, the words falling out of my mouth before I could stop them. That's ridiculous. Linda shrieked. She had a heart condition. These things happen. After someone steals her medication and replaces pages in her will. Mr. Patterson was already reaching for his phone. I'm calling the police. This has gone way beyond document fraud. David lunged toward the desk, trying to grab the phone, but Charlie erupted into motion. My gentle therapy dog launched himself between David and me, barking with a ferocity I'd never heard from him before. Get that mutt away from me. David shouted, raising his hand. Touch my dog and I'll tear your throat out, I snarled, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Dr. Martinez was already on her own phone. Yes, I need police and possibly a coroner's investigator at the Patterson Law Office immediately. We have reason to suspect elder abuse and possible homicide. Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She was supposed to just comply. The medication was just supposed to make her confused, more manageable. Jesus Christ, Linda. David roared. Shut up. But it was too late. She'd confessed to everything within earshot of witnesses, and Dr. Martinez was recording the entire conversation on her phone. As sirens began wailing in the distance, I knelt down and buried my face in Charlie's fur. My grandmother hadn't abandoned me after all. She died trying to protect us both. And now everyone was going to know the truth. The police arrived faster than I expected, their heavy footsteps echoing through the law office hallway. Charlie immediately moved closer to me, his training kicking in as he sensed my rising anxiety. 2 officers entered first, followed by a detective who looked like she'd seen everything twice. I'm Detective Walsh, the woman said, surveying the room with sharp eyes. We got a call about possible elder abuse and document fraud. More than that, Dr. Martinez said grimly, holding up her phone. I recorded a confession to medication tampering that may have contributed to my patient's death. Linda was still sobbing in her chair, mascara streaming down her cheeks, but David had gone completely silent. His face was stone, and I could practically see him calculating his next move. Nobody leaves until we get statements, Detective Walsh announced. Mr. Patterson, I'll need to see all documentation related to the Rose Chin estate. Of course, he said, gathering the papers with shaking hands. But detective, there's something else you need to know. I just realized we may have a bigger problem. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Your grandmother's safe deposit box, Mr. Patterson said slowly. The one where she kept her most important documents, including backup copies of her will. It was accessed 3 days after her death. Detective Walsh looked up sharply. Accessed by whom? According to the bank records, Linda Morrison. She had emergency access as next of kin. That's perfectly legal, David said quickly, speaking for the first time since the police arrived. Family members handle these things after someone passes. Legal, yes, Detective Walsh replied. But suspicious timing, especially given what we're hearing about document tampering. Linda suddenly stopped crying, her head snapping up. David, they can't prove anything. The safety deposit box was empty when I got there. The silence that followed was deafening. David slowly turned to stare at his wife, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. You idiot, he whispered. You just admitted to lying about the box being empty. Detective Walsh raised an eyebrow. So there were documents in the box. I meant. Linda stammered, realizing her mistake. She meant nothing, David interrupted desperately. She's confused, upset about her sister-in-law's death. Actually, Dr. Martinez interjected, Linda Morrison wasn't Rose Chen's next of kin. Rose never remarried after her husband died, and she had no children. Her legal next of kin would be her brother in Seattle, not her brother's wife. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. So Linda shouldn't have had access to the safe deposit box at all, I said. Detective Walsh was taking notes rapidly. How exactly did you gain access to that box, Mrs. Morrison? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Charlie, sensing the shift in the room's energy, let out a low whine and pressed his full weight against my legs. She forged the documents, I said, the realization hitting me like lightning. Just like she forged the will. She's been forging Grandma's signature. That's not. Linda started, then stopped abruptly as she realized anything she said would only make things worse. David suddenly stood up, his bulk filling the small office space. We're not saying another word without a lawyer. Smart choice, Detective Walsh said dryly. You're both going to need good ones. But as she started reading them their rights, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or something might happen to that precious dog of yours. My blood turned to ice as I showed the message to Detective Walsh. Someone else was involved in this conspiracy. And Charlie and I were still in danger. Detective Walsh's expression darkened as she read the threatening text on my phone. When did you receive this? Just now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Charlie immediately picked up on my fear, pressing himself against my legs and performing the deep pressure therapy he'd been trained to do. The number's blocked, she muttered, examining my phone more closely. But the timing is interesting. Right when we're making arrests. Her sharp eyes moved between Linda and David, both now in handcuffs. Either of you want to tell me who else is involved in this? We want our lawyer, David repeated stubbornly, but I caught him glancing nervously at Linda. There's someone else, Linda suddenly blurted out, ignoring her husband's murderous glare. David, they already know everything. That text proves. Shut up. David roared, straining against his handcuffs. Detective Walsh stepped between them. Mrs. Morrison, if you're willing to cooperate, now would be the time. But before Linda could respond, Mr. Patterson's office phone rang shrilly. He looked at Detective Walsh for permission before answering. Patterson Law Office. What? No, that's impossible. His face went white as he listened. Yes, I understand. We'll be right there. He hung up with shaking hands. That was the bank. Someone just attempted to access Rose Chen's accounts using forged documentation. They have the person in custody, but... He swallowed hard. They're claiming to be representing her granddaughter's interests. They had photos of Charlie, detailed information about you, everything. My heart stopped. Who was it? The bank manager didn't give me a name over the phone, but Detective Walsh, I think we need to get over there immediately. Detective Walsh was already motioning to her backup officers. Johnson, transport these two to the station. Martinez, Thompson, you're with me. She turned to Dr. Martinez. Doctor, I'm going to need you to come with us as a witness. What about me? I asked, panic rising in my chest. What if whoever sent that text tries something? You're coming too, Detective Walsh said firmly. And bring Charlie. If someone's been watching you closely enough to get detailed photos of him, I want you where I can keep an eye on you. As we prepared to leave for the bank, Linda suddenly broke free from the officer escorting her and turned back to me. You don't understand, she said desperately. We never wanted to hurt Rose. It was just supposed to be about the money. But then she started asking questions, getting suspicious, and Patricia said. Patricia? Detective Walsh grabbed Linda's arm. Who is Patricia? Linda's face crumpled as she realized she'd revealed too much. Patricia Hammond. She was Rose's financial advisor. She said she could help us access the accounts early, before Rose died. But when Rose started getting suspicious about missing money. You're saying the financial advisor was part of this conspiracy? It was her idea. Linda sobbed. She said elderly clients die all the time, and their assets just sit there earning nothing. She had a whole system worked out. We were just supposed to be beneficiaries, but then Rose started changing her will, protecting you and that dog, and Patricia said we had to do something more drastic. The room spun around me. Grandma's financial advisor, someone she trusted with her life savings, had orchestrated her murder. And now that same person was at the bank, probably trying to steal whatever was left. How long has this been going on? Dr. Martinez asked, her voice tight with professional anger. Patricia approached us about 6 months ago, Linda whispered. She said Rose was getting too old to manage her accounts properly, that it would be a kindness to help her redistribute her assets to family who could use them now. Detective Walsh's radio crackled to life. Walsh, we've got a situation at First National. Suspect is refusing to cooperate and demanding to speak with the Chin family's attorney. She's also asking specifically about the granddaughter and whether the dog has been surrendered yet. Charlie's ears perked up at the mention of him, and he looked at me with those intelligent brown eyes that had seen me through so many dark days. I scratched behind his ears, drawing comfort from his warm presence. She's been tracking our every move, I realized. That's how she knew to send the text right when Linda and David were arrested. Detective Walsh nodded grimly. Which means she's been watching you longer than we thought. The question is, what exactly was she planning to do once you gave up Charlie? The answer hit me like ice water in my veins. She needed me isolated. Depressed. Too broken to ask questions about Grandma's finances. And if that didn't work? I looked down at Charlie, my faithful companion who'd been my lifeline through the darkest periods of my life, and felt a chill run down my spine. Then she'd make sure I had an accident too. The drive to the bank felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life. Charlie sat in my lap in the back of Detective Walsh's unmarked car, his warm weight grounding me as my mind raced through the implications of what we just learned. Every shadow on the street looked threatening now, every passing car potentially containing someone watching us. How long do you think Patricia has been stealing from my grandmother? I asked as we pulled into the bank's parking lot. Based on what Mrs. Morrison said, at least 6 months of active theft, Detective Walsh replied. But financial advisors have access to accounts for years. This could go back much further. My stomach churned. Grandma Rose had trusted Patricia completely, always bragging about how smart and helpful her financial advisor was. She helped Grandma set up her retirement accounts when Grandpa died. That was almost 8 years ago. Detective Walsh parked and turned to look at me seriously. I need you to understand something. If Patricia Hammond has been systematically stealing from your grandmother for years, and if she orchestrated what amounts to murder to cover it up, she's not going to go down quietly. The text you received suggests she sees you as a direct threat. Because I asked to see the original will. Because you started asking the right questions. And because removing you from the picture might have been part of her endgame all along. The bank manager, Mr. Kozlov, met us at the entrance with obvious relief on his face. Thank God you're here, detective. She's been getting increasingly agitated, demanding we release the funds to her immediately. She claims she has full power of attorney. Where is she now? Conference room B. We've kept her isolated, but she's making threats about lawsuits and demanding to speak with the family. He glanced at me nervously. She specifically asked if the granddaughter had complied with the will's requirements about the pet. Charlie's ears flattened against his head, picking up on the tension radiating from all of us. I stroked his fur, trying to keep both of us calm. She wants to know if I gave him up, I murmured. Why would that matter for accessing bank accounts? Detective Walsh exchanged a grim look with Mr. Kozlov. Because isolated, grief-stricken people don't ask inconvenient questions about missing money. Show us to this conference room. As we walked through the bank's marble lobby, I caught sight of a familiar figure through the glass walls of the conference room. Patricia Hammond looked exactly like she always had, perfectly styled silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of polished professionalism that had made my grandmother trust her implicitly. But now I could see something cold and calculating in her expression that I'd missed before. She doesn't know we're here yet, Mr. Kozlov whispered. What's the plan? I want to observe her for a minute before we go in, Detective Walsh said. See how she reacts when. Patricia suddenly looked up and made direct eye contact with me through the glass. Her face transformed from frustrated impatience to something that made my blood freeze. It wasn't surprise or fear at being caught. It was rage. Pure, murderous rage. And then she smiled. She's been waiting for us, I breathed, Charlie pressing protectively against my legs. This isn't her getting caught. This is her springing a trap. Detective Walsh's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon. Mr. Kozlov, I need you to evacuate this building. Now. But before anyone could move, Patricia stood up in the conference room and held up her phone, pointing it directly at us through the glass. On the screen, I could see what looked like a live video feed of my apartment building. She'd been watching my home this entire time. And something told me Charlie and I wouldn't be safe anywhere until this was over. Patricia's smile through the conference room glass was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. She held up her phone, the video feed of my apartment building crystal clear on the screen, and mouthed words I could read perfectly. You should have given up the dog. Detective Walsh immediately grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Now. Wait, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Look at her screen again. Patricia had switched to what looked like a different camera angle, this one showing the interior of my apartment. My tiny kitchen, the couch where Charlie and I watched movies, his favorite rope toy still lying on the floor. She's been inside my home, I breathed, Charlie whimpering beside me as he picked up on my terror. Mr. Kozlov, Detective Walsh barked, lock down this building. No one in or out without police clearance. She was already on her radio. This is Walsh, I need units at 447, Oak Street Apartment 2B immediately. Possible break-in in progress, suspect may still be on scene. But Patricia wasn't done with her show. She held up a third device, a tablet this time, and the screen made my heart stop completely. Security footage from the veterinary clinic where Charlie went for his checkups. The timestamp showed this morning. She's been tracking everywhere we go, I whispered. She knows Charlie's vet, my apartment, probably my school, everything. Patricia finally stood up in the conference room and walked to the door. When she opened it, her voice carried clearly across the bank lobby, sweet and professional as always. Hello, sweetheart, she said to me, like we were meeting for coffee instead of her being caught red-handed stealing from my dead grandmother. I was hoping we could have a little chat. Detective Walsh stepped protectively in front of me. Patricia Hammond, you're under arrest for. Oh, I don't think so, Patricia interrupted pleasantly. You see, I have several associates positioned at locations important to our dear girl here. Her apartment, as you've seen. The veterinary clinic. Even her favorite coffee shop near campus. She tilted her head like she was discussing the weather. One phone call from me, and things could get very unpleasant at all of those places. My legs felt weak. How long have you been watching me? Since you were 18 and your grandmother first started talking about leaving everything to you, Patricia said matter-of-factly. Rose was so proud of how you'd overcome your mental health struggles, how that dog had helped you. She talked about you constantly. It became clear you'd eventually be a problem. A problem? Detective Walsh's voice was deadly quiet. Smart girls who ask questions usually are. Patricia's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something vicious underneath. Especially ones who recover from depression and develop inconvenient confidence. Charlie suddenly tensed beside me, his hackles rising. He was staring at something behind us, and when I turned, I saw a man in maintenance coveralls mopping near the bank's entrance. But he wasn't really mopping, he was watching us. Detective, I whispered, trying not to move my lips. The janitor. Walsh caught on immediately, her hand moving toward her weapon again. How many people are working with you, Patricia? Enough. Patricia's smile returned, cold and satisfied. You see, this was always going to end one of two ways. Either that girl would be too broken by grief to interfere with my business arrangements, or she'd need to be removed from the equation entirely. The maintenance worker started walking toward us, his mop bucket abandoned. At the same time, Patricia's phone buzzed with what sounded like a text confirmation. Ah, she said pleasantly, checking the message. My associate at the apartment building just confirmed entry. I hope you didn't leave anything valuable there, dear. Break-ins can be so destructive. Detective Walsh was already radiating for backup, but Patricia held up her hand. I wouldn't rush things if I were you, Detective. My people have very specific instructions about what to do if they don't hear from me every 30 minutes. She checked her elegant watch. 26 minutes and counting. Charlie pressed closer to me, and I could feel him trembling with stress. This wasn't just about money anymore. Patricia wanted us eliminated, and she'd been planning it for years. The maintenance worker was getting closer, and I could see Detective Walsh calculating distances, angles, escape routes. But Patricia seemed to anticipate every move we might make. You know what the beautiful thing about this situation is? Patricia continued conversationally, as if we were discussing stock portfolios instead of murder. Even if something unfortunate happens to me here, my associates have very clear instructions. The veterinary clinic closes at 6 on Fridays. Dr. Peterson always stays late to finish paperwork, all alone in that building with all those medical supplies. My blood turned to ice. Dr. Peterson had been Charlie's vet since he was a puppy. She was a kind woman in her 60s who treated Charlie like her own grandchild, always keeping special treats behind the counter for him. If you hurt her, I started, but Patricia cut me off with a laugh. Hurt her? Oh sweetheart, I'm not going to hurt anyone. Accidents happen all the time in veterinary clinics. Chemical spills, equipment malfunctions. Very tragic, but these things occur when people get careless. Detective Walsh's radio crackled. Walsh, we've got a situation at 447 Oak Street. Apartment 2B has been ransacked, but no suspects on scene. Also getting reports of suspicious activity at Northside Veterinary Clinic. 23 minutes, Patricia announced, glancing at her watch again. The maintenance worker was now close enough that I could see his face clearly. He looked like he'd been living rough, hollow cheeks, nervous energy, the kind of desperation that made people do terrible things for money. His hand was moving towards something concealed in his coveralls. Charlie suddenly let out a sharp bark, not his usual warning growl, but the specific alert bark he'd been trained to give when he detected something dangerous. His nose was pointed toward the back of the bank, where emergency exits were located. There are more of them, I whispered to Detective Walsh. Charlie's alerting to the rear exit. Walsh's face went grim. We were surrounded. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia said, her voice taking on a businesslike tone. You're going to walk out of this bank with me. We're going to take a little drive, and you're going to sign some papers transferring your grandmother's remaining assets to their rightful beneficiaries, namely, me and my associates who've worked so hard to manage this situation. And if I refuse? Then Dr. Peterson has a very unfortunate accident in about 20 minutes. Followed by some unpleasantness at your favorite coffee shop, where I believe several of your classmates are currently studying for finals. My heart stopped. She wasn't just threatening me anymore. She was threatening everyone I cared about, everyone who'd helped me build a life after my darkest period. Detective Walsh was typing rapidly on her phone, presumably coordinating with backup units, but I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. Even if police rushed to every location Patricia had mentioned, there was no guarantee they'd arrive in time. You've been planning this for years, I said, a horrible realization dawning. The medication tampering, the forged will, getting Linda and David involved, all of it was just to get me isolated and desperate enough to sign away everything. Finally, she understands, Patricia said with mock pride. Though you nearly ruined everything by asking to see the original will. I had to accelerate the timeline considerably. Charlie was still alerting toward the rear exit, his body rigid with concentration. But something in his posture had changed. He wasn't just detecting a threat anymore, he was tracking movement. Someone was coming through the back of the bank. And Patricia's confident smile suggested it wasn't backup arriving to help us. 18 minutes, she announced cheerfully. Shall we get started with those papers? The sound of the bank's rear exit opening made everyone freeze. Charlie's alert bark had been right, someone else was coming in through the back. But when I saw who emerged from the hallway, my heart nearly stopped for an entirely different reason. Dr. Peterson. I gasped. My elderly veterinarian walked into the lobby, but something was terribly wrong. Her usually kind face was pale with terror, and her hands were shaking as she held them up in front of her. Behind her walked a woman I didn't recognize, tall, muscular, wearing all black. I'm so sorry, honey, Dr. Peterson called out to me, her voice cracking. They said they'd hurt you if I didn't come. Patricia's smile widened with satisfaction. I told you I had people positioned everywhere. Dr. Peterson was so cooperative once we explained the situation to her. Let her go, Detective Walsh said firmly, her hand hovering near her weapon. She's not part of this. Oh, but she is now, Patricia replied. You see, Detective, I've learned that our young friend here responds much better to threats against others than threats against herself. Very noble, very predictable. The woman in black gave Dr. Peterson a small shove, pushing her closer to where we stood. Charlie immediately picked up on the vet's distress, whimpering softly and looking between her and me with confused concern. Dr. Peterson had always been one of his favorite people. Here's the new arrangement, Patricia announced. We're all going to walk out of this bank together, one big, happy family. You're going to dismiss your backup, Detective Walsh, and we're going to take a drive to my office where the asset transfer papers are waiting. And if I refuse? Detective Walsh asked. Patricia nodded to the maintenance worker, who pulled out what looked like a small device with a red button. Then my associate here sends a signal to the team currently surrounding your police station. I believe several of your colleagues are working late tonight. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just threatening civilians anymore, she was threatening other cops. Dr. Peterson suddenly spoke up, her voice stronger than I expected. Patricia, I've known you for 3 years through the business networking group. I never thought you were capable of something like this. People do what they must to survive, Margaret, Patricia replied coolly. Rose Chen was sitting on nearly $500,000 while younger people struggled to pay their bills. I simply redistributed the wealth more efficiently. By murdering her. The words came out harsher than I intended. By helping a sick old woman find peace, Patricia corrected, her tone suggesting she actually believed her own rationalization. The heart medication adjustment was practically a mercy killing. Detective Walsh's radio crackled again. Walsh, we've got eyes on multiple suspects surrounding the station. Count at least 6 individuals in tactical positions. Requesting instructions. Patricia held up her phone, showing a group text thread. One message from me, and your colleagues become very unhappy campers. Charlie suddenly did something I'd never seen him do before. Instead of staying pressed against my legs like his training dictated, he took several steps toward Dr. Peterson. But he wasn't just going to her for comfort, his nose was working, scenting something. Charlie, stay, I called softly, but he ignored me, continuing his approach to the vet. Dr. Peterson looked down at him with the same affection she always showed, but there was something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like determination. You know, Patricia, Dr. Peterson said conversationally, there's something you should probably know about threatening veterinarians. What's that? Patricia asked, sounding bored. We carry a lot of very interesting chemicals in our medical bags. Before anyone could react, Dr. Peterson pulled a small syringe from her jacket pocket and jabbed it directly into the arm of the woman in black who'd been guarding her. The woman dropped immediately, unconscious before she hit the marble floor. Sedative, Dr. Peterson explained calmly to our shocked faces. Enough to drop a 150-pound Rottweiler. Works even faster on humans. Patricia's confident expression cracked for the first time. Kill her, she screamed to the maintenance worker. But Charlie was already moving. My therapy dog, trained for gentle comfort and emotional support, launched himself at the maintenance worker with protective fury I didn't know he possessed. The man went down hard, his device skittering across the floor. And suddenly, the tables had turned. The maintenance worker hit the marble floor hard, Charlie standing over him with his teeth bared, a sight I never thought I'd see from my gentle therapy dog. Detective Walsh immediately moved into action, weapon drawn and pointed at Patricia. It's over, Walsh announced firmly. Your whole operation just collapsed. But Patricia wasn't finished. Her mask of polished professionalism finally shattered completely, revealing the desperate criminal underneath. You think this ends anything? I have $10 million of Rose's money in offshore accounts. Even if you arrest me, you'll never find it all. 10 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. You've been stealing from her for years. 8 years of careful management, Patricia snarled. That foolish woman never even noticed the missing funds until the very end. She was going to ruin everything, leave it all to some college kid and her mutt. Dr. Peterson was checking the pulse of the unconscious woman while keeping the syringe ready. Patricia, you need professional help. This level of rationalization, this complete lack of empathy, it's pathological. Don't psychoanalyze me, Margaret. Patricia snapped. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I can still send that signal. Your police friends, the people at the coffee shop, they're all still in danger. Detective Walsh stepped closer, her weapon steady. Put the phone down, Patricia. No. Patricia's finger hovered over the screen. I want immunity. Full immunity and safe passage out of the country, or everyone dies. Charlie suddenly padded over to me, pressing against my legs. But instead of his usual comfort behavior, he was alert, watching something behind Patricia. His ears were perked forward, focused on the bank's front entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see vehicles pulling up. Multiple police cars, an ambulance, and what looked like a SWAT van. Detective Walsh's backup had finally arrived in force. Patricia noticed my gaze and spun around to look. When she saw the response team surrounding the building, her face went white. You called them anyway, she whispered. Even knowing what I'd do. I called them because of what you'd do, Detective Walsh replied. Patricia Hammond, you're under arrest for the murder of Rose Chen, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, kidnapping, and about 15 other charges I'll think of on the way to the station. Patricia's phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering on the marble floor. The screen showed her group text thread, but she'd never sent the final message. Charlie immediately went to Dr. Peterson, who scratched behind his ears with obvious relief. Good boy, she murmured. Very good boy. How did you know to bring the sedative? I asked her as SWAT officers flooded into the building. Dr. Peterson smiled, some of her usual warmth returning. I didn't. I always carry emergency medications, occupational hazard of being a mobile vet. But when they grabbed me at the clinic and started talking about threatening you and Charlie, I figured I might need to improvise. As Patricia was led away in handcuffs, she turned back to me one last time. You have no idea what you've cost me. I know exactly what I've cost you, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. The money you stole from my grandmother. The life you took from her. The peace of mind you tried to take from me. Charlie pressed closer against my legs, and I felt the familiar comfort of his warm presence. We both survived something that should have destroyed us. Later, after the statements and paperwork and endless questions, Detective Walsh found me in the bank parking lot, sitting on a bench with Charlie's head in my lap. The offshore accounts, she said, settling beside us. We found records on Patricia's phone. Looks like your inheritance is considerably larger than anyone realized. I scratched Charlie's ears, listening to his contented sigh. How much larger? Nearly $12 million. Your grandmother was a very wealthy woman, and Patricia had been stealing from multiple elderly clients over the years. The number was staggering, but somehow it didn't feel real yet. What felt real was Charlie's warm weight, the knowledge that we were safe, and the certainty that Grandma Rose had never stopped trying to protect us. Detective? I said quietly. Thank you for believing me when I said something was wrong. Thank you for trusting your instincts, she replied. And thank Charlie for having such good ones too. Charlie's tail thumped against the bench, as if he understood he was being praised. We were going home together, exactly like Grandma Rose had always wanted.